have the one and only Mr. Paul Obinna Wilson, ME. He is quite a big character. He's a researcher, cultural engagement specialist, and most known for his latest project, the Lineage Timeage course. I know Paul personally as well. I recently just interviewed him on my radio show, and he was my only guest that used the amount of bad language that he used. So I did give him a pre-warning tonight, and he's promised me that he's going to be on his best behaviour. Didn't you, Brother Paul? Yeah, look, he's got his hands in a prayer position. He's going to be on his best behaviour tonight. Only clean language. He's been told to keep it to a limit. And I've also advised him that we'll rein him in if he tends to go over, because he often tends to do that. So welcome, the one and only Mr. Paul Obinna.
Thank you. Yeah, I've got a lot of information to cover. You are recording this, isn't it? So
sure are.
Yeah, so if I move quickly, you'll be able to go over some things later or whatever. Could the host let me share, please? I'm all ready otherwise. Okay. Oh, let me see. Yes, I'm here. Okay. I'm hoping you can all see the screen now. Good. So I'm going to start this show, slideshow, Faith in the Black Lives Matter, Post-Traumatic Slavery Disorder. The two elements I'm going to look at are historical discontinuity and also re-traumatization. My name, Paul Obinna, just let me say, my motive behind me getting involved into the teaching of history, etc., and psychology was simply because of my heritage. My background is Igbo and English. So you see my two middle names there, Paul for my English name, and then Obinna, which means the heart father. Father's heart is my Igbo name, Igbo being Eastern Nigeria. I've been teaching this kind of material research now for about 35 years. And it's something that is heartfelt, but also I have to be very clear, have clarity with how I present and the things I'll put forward. So like I said, I'm going to go quickly. Please, if you want me to stop at a point, I will sooner stop at that point and discuss it than me carry on with myself, as I'd say, if that makes sense. But so I'll, let's see, I'll get on to this next one. What happened was back in 1991, I'd been in Manchester for around about 5 years teaching at Juicy Central High School in Moss Side. I got there just before it became Gunchester. There were two Manchesters. There was Gunchester and Madchester. Madchester was for the music. Gunchester was largely for the supply of the drugs, etc., for the music scene. I worked very much in Gunchester. 1991, I started teaching in Garth Prison, which at first was a Toxteth referral from Liverpool, but then it became very much a Mancunian referral with several, well, many guys, either gang members or they were involved in the life. At the roundabout in 1989, sorry, 1991, I started teaching adult classes. We used a book by Dr. Malana Karenga called Introduction to Black Studies. And what happened was there was something that came up very quickly. The 7 areas of Black studies were history, religion, sociology, politics, economics, creative production, and psychology. But what I realized very quickly, many Black people don't want to study their history simply due to their psychology. And that's part of this traumatic lasting of enslavement and colonization. And so because of this, I moved the number 7, and what I call the lineage strategy, brings the study of psychology, number 7 to number 1, displacing history to number 2. it gives us the term psychohistory, which at the time I thought it was something new to me. I didn't realize it was actually a discipline in sociology from France, I believe, and the United States of America. There was a book written by Dr. Amos Wilson called The Falsification of African Consciousness, and he coined the term in that round about 1992. So there are 3 schools of Black psychology, for instance, and I really would like to appreciate this, is that for me growing up, if I wanted to know about my European side, my white side, my mother's people's side, I got up out of my bed. I went to school. I put on the television. I put whatever information would be fired at me, that would be being nurtured. To find out about my African side was somewhat, for instance, my first, at 4 years old, I started school in 1963 as a 4-year-old. So what happened was we had Helen Bannerman's Little Black Sambo, we had Noddy, we had all these things about gollywogs, we had all these stereotypical images, etc. And then on the TV, we always had Tarzan. So Tarzan would, you know, Lord of the Jungle in his underwear, running things, hanging out with monkeys. And what I was going to say about AIDS in Africa, but never mind, I'll do that another time. But what happened is the nurturance of my African side was not as easy. It wasn't easy for me to get respectful information. I was actually adopted into a white family as well. The blessing for me was this. On my first day in school, I went up the slide in front of a Scottish boy called Ian, and Ian said, "I'll stab you with my petty knife, you black person." And what happened was I understood the violence because it wasn't long after the Second World War. And so as a 4-year-old, I was more mystified by the black, because as you can see, I'm not dark. I was darker because I was outside more as a youngster. But I was trying to, what do you mean black? Anyway, I went home, asked my mom, and she said, "You're not black, you're golden brown, and you're half English and you're half African." So from that point at 4 years old, if you called me African, I was cool. If you called me black, I'd fight. And I became a fighter. Yeah, violence became my way for many years on and off. So much so I was put into martial arts when I was 14 years old, sorry, so that I could hit people legitimately. And then from that, I got into Zen Buddhism because of the contact with the martial arts and the focus and everything else. But I did have a very kind of traumatic upbringing. It's a town of Blackburn. I don't know if you know Blackburn. I always say it's a good name for the town, especially in the 1960s. Damn. So anyway, what I realized is this thing, the universalization of European thoughts and opinion. For instance, we do not call white history. We just call it history. We don't call white psychology. It's universalized in general. Anybody else has to call it black psychology or women's history, or anybody who's not the usual alignment with the power core. So in doing this, Karenga was saying that we have what we call traditional, reformist, and radical schools of black psychology. Traditional is white psychology applied to black people and everybody else. Reformist is where there's a black component put into it. But the radical is a psychology which refers to symbolism, to cultures which are African in origin. And in actual fact then analyzes white culture as well. So I just want to put to you that tonight I'm going to be coming from the reformist and radical schools. So you may have to get ready for a ride, if you see what I say. So I want to start with this, the BCAD timeline construct. Just a quick little anecdote. One day I was playing table tennis with a friend of mine, God rest his soul, Ben Dudley, who was a fellow teacher. He went to make a phone call. In walks this Scottish guy, belly hanging over his tracksuit bottoms and whatever. And he said, "Is Ben about?" And I said, "Oh, he's gone to make a phone call." He goes, "Oh, do you want a knock-up?" This is playing table tennis. He beat me 21-1, and the one was the first point as he weighed me up. He then beat me 21-0. Then he started coaching. And this is me. I was very fit at the time. And I was going like, right, okay. And he said, Paul, where are you looking when you're playing the game? And I said, I'm looking at you. He says, why do you think I'm going to move the table? And I went, he said, keep your eye on the ball. And I said, wait a minute. I know this from boxing. You call it ring craft. You know your environment so well that you don't even have to think about it. So that was a table tennis table. And so I look at things like this. We've got hockey, football, netball, basketball. But then there's another game called chess, which I love. And I put on there, of course, Game of Thrones, because if we're talking history, that's how we used to anchor people in to time. We might, so for instance, Bishop Ussher, they gave the creation date of 4004 BC. Some say 24th of October, and some will say 9 a.m. But he said this is the calculation going back, saying this is the thing. Yeah, God clocked on, I believe, in certain. Anyway, so the Game of Thrones, the Game of Thrones is very important, because that's how we say in the 5th year of whatever. But then there was a guy called Dionysius Exiguus, a Roman Catholic monk working for Pope John I, who gave us the AD structure, Anno Domini, and then later the Venerable Bede gave us the BC a couple of hundred years later. Now that dominates around the world, as we know. There's the Jewish, the Hebrew calendar. There's the Islamic calendar. Everybody got these. They said Pol Pot of Cambodia, they called a madman for inventing his own calendar. But it's history, isn't it? It's history. Anyway, this is basically the structure that we have. This is a structure going from 5000 BC through to 1 BC, then AD 1 to AD 3000. Grammatically, we're supposed to put the number, then BC, then grammatically we say, then AD, then 1, year the Lord 1. So in this structure, what happens is the usual historical range black people get is this, which is basically slavery, enslavement. Then sometimes, this is the timeline that Reverend Michael was talking about. Then sometimes we get the Arab historical range, which is going to go back to round about AD 624, something around 622, sorry. And so we have a continuum which pulls in that. But then what we don't get is the African historical continuum, ancient to modern, which is going to go like this. So we're very much restricted into this small piece of history in general, which is when Africans have been enslaved and turned into other something else. And so just let me put that up again. That's a European historical continuum going back to the foundation. Well, this is European civilization, record writing. So Homer recites the Iliad. They claim it was written. So that's how long the European historical continuum goes back in terms of civilization. Now, what I want to do is, this little strip here, I noticed someone there is, I think it was an Igbo name I saw, but then we might turn around and call it Nigerian, the name now a Nigerian nationality, which only goes back to 1914, because Nigeria was named for the London Times newspaper competition that was run, which was won by Flora Shaw, who suggested Nigeria, meaning the River Niger area. She later married Frederick Lugard, the first colonial secretary there. But what happens is the largest population on the African continent today is named for a London Times newspaper competition. Thank God it wasn't the Sun. Because I might be saying, H. Bartlett from Battersea suggests Nigno Wongo Bongo land. But today I'd be saying my mother's English and my father's Nigno Wongo Bongolian. But that's the power to name and declare. So as we know, Adam was given the power to name all the wonderful creatures. But what happens is later, Carl Linnaeus came along with his taxonomy in the 1700s and named everything with a Latin name. So this naming game is very, very important. So let me, the European colonization, 1884 to 1885, we see a map of Africa like that, and there's not a line on there that's been drawn by an African. That's a major point. There's not one country on there that was actually designed by an African. This is 1884. the Greenwich Mean Time Conference was held in Washington, D.C. Then later, the same, more or less the same same participants go over to Berlin, meet in Germany 1884, then sign a treaty in 1885. And the construct that we're living in now, that's when it was actually done. So I did a session for Bernardo's. I was asking the participants to place these religions in order, chronological order, using the BC AD time frame. The question was, what is Ma'at? Which is the last one with the feather. What is Ma'at? So we started with Ma'at being a pre-dynastic concept cosmology, which later Judaism, if I take the book Acts 7:22, and it says, and Moses was raised in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and grew powerful in words and deeds. So if we're going to put that forward there, he had to know Ma'at, the admonishments of Ma'at. So that was the thing there. So Judaism comes at this point. I would love to have this conversation with people about how these influences go on, because in Christianity, for instance, I regularly remind anti-Semitic Christians that Jesus was a Jew. Does this make sense? There's some people do not get that and carry on with themselves in all kinds of ways. Islam then follows as the youngest of the world religions, but then, of these four. But then you may say technically, some Muslims will claim that to submit to the will of God goes to the beginning of all time. So I always ask, I said, do you have a reference that you can give me with a religion named Islam back before AD 622? Because that's how cold sometimes I have to be in the reasoning when people get into arguments with things. And I asked some young people in the Leadership Academy in Eden Leadership Academy in Cheetham Hill a few weeks ago. I just said, so is Muhammad, peace be upon him, is he the first prophet of Islam or the last? And they said he's the last. So it becomes a very interesting when people are doing the one-upmanship about which religion is best. For me, I always say it's a bit like saying which is the best way to go to London. Is it bicycle? Is it by bus? Is it by train? Is it by car? Is it by helicopter? Is it by plane? I said, basically, it's about getting to the destination for me by the most effective route for the person. I don't decry any other means of transport. So if we put these dates down to go with it. So let me move on very quickly. Up from Slavery is a book by Booker T. Washington, but this is Dr. Patricia Newton. There's a thing that we say post-traumatic slavery syndrome. Dr. Newton came up with the idea of post-traumatic slavery disorder in 1995. I know this personally because I designed a book cover for her, but she didn't actually end up publishing that. She passed away 28th of September this year. And so I was a friend of hers. She was discussing back in we did this conference together in 2004, Holistic Health and the Education of the African Family. This is down in Bristol. And there she was talking about how stress and trauma can be stored in what she called the red nucleus. So not being a brain scientist, I don't understand this as much. I remember her saying about layers experientially, that layers will be going in onto this red nucleus and affecting the family. At the time, it's now known as epigenetics. Epigenetics is quite a new, relatively new concept and idea of this trauma producing a DNA change. What I remembered though, when I was preparing for this, was inherited trait producing a behavioral change. Dr. Richard King did a book called The African Origin of Biological Psychiatry in 1990. In 1991, this is what it said: the ancient Egyptian knew the relationship of the pineal gland and higher states of consciousness more than 4,000 years before the rediscovery by modern biological psychiatry. The concept of an African origin of biological psychiatry is based on the review of the evidence related to the Eye of Horus found in the tomb of Pharaoh Tutankhamun. This is symbolic thought, symbolic thought. And so what happens is I met Dr. King at my friend's place in Washington, D.C., when I was attending a conference on melanin. And I asked him about the words jinn and gen, like words like genius. We use the term genius. Well, the term itself, I love words, you see, for a reason I'm not going to now. But what happened is the Oxford Universal Dictionary will tell you the word genius means the native inborn intellect. Then it says the tutelary spirit of a person or a place, and two opposed spirits attending each person, influence them powerfully for good and for ill. That's the word genius. I then call it genes in us. So sometimes what gets nurtured in us can be either positive or negative. It's a bit like the Islamic angels writing and recording our deeds. So I was asking him about jinn and asking him about gen.
So I think we have Paul back with us.
Yes, sir. Yes,
And I'm going
so sorry.
It's not your fault. These things happen.
Crashed out. Yeah.
There we go. You're
okay
again. So
I'm back on there.
Brilliant.
And where's this? And so go to this. So play from current slide. So yes. So this was this gave an interest for me about learning about the about inherited qualities of people. In her, it is in her. Inherited talks about the her, not the him. So I was very fascinated. And so there was a motive for Black History. The founder of of Black History Month, which had just come out of in the UK, was Carter G. Woodson. And he said, if a race has no history, or it has no worthy tradition, it becomes a negligible factor in the world. Let me just move these down here. In the world, in the thought of the world, and it stands in danger of being exterminated. The American Indian, remember this is 1927, he's speaking in quite authoritative terms. The American Indian left no continuous record. He did not appreciate the value of tradition, and where is he today? I don't agree with that, but there's a quote. The Hebrew keenly appreciated the value of tradition and is attested by the Bible itself. In spite of worldwide persecution, therefore, he is a great factor in our civilization. And this is one thing I really got to get. There's a truth and a contradiction. Arthur Schlesinger, one of the greatest historians in the United States, he said that self-knowledge for an individual as well as a nation begins with history. But then in protection of the United States, he wrote this book, The Disuniting of America, Reflections on a Multicultural Society, where he largely attacked Afrocentrism, not on the grounds of race, but on the grounds of it being against nationhood, because he saw it as a fragmentation of nationhood in the United States. And this is why we need to really understand the motives behind these kind of so-called racial dynamics, or interpreted as racial dynamics. A lot of times it's political in nature. There's a politic behind it. And so this is in 1991. So this itself, we explore. James Joyce, he said that history is a nightmare from which I am trying to awaken. This is from his book, Ulysses. But this history the old thing it says, like one man's meat is another man's poison. Man is a Sanskrit word meaning mind. So one mind's meat is another mind's poison. So there's all things source for gooses. So we talk consistency. So this is a quote we call a historical ghetto. Most of the history of African people throughout the world is told through slavery. A short period in our history considering that we are the oldest of the world's people. That's what Dr. Clark said. Once again, I'm going to about this historical discontinuity. And so it's a very important facet. Because what happened was, let me say this, when George Floyd, God rest his soul, when he was executed, when he was murdered, whatever you're going to say that, remember that we were 3 months into this pandemic, there was a massive stress, plenty of fear. Then all of a sudden, boom, this thing happens. For many Black people who had not been receiving any information, extensive information about their history, there was a re-immersion into enslavement. It was into police brutality, persecution, lynching, etc. That, without going in with purpose, is re-traumatization. And this is one of the things I have to keep stressing to people about going back to that thing. It's a very important thing that you do it with a purpose and intention of healing. And the message that we have, just centrally, I was raised strongly as a Christian. And I learned about a man who made the blind see, the deaf hear, the lame walk, cured leprosy, made people complete, fed people, walked on water. He did this, raised the dead. And so what those things about I don't know if you know this, that the term, the N-word, actual fact, is derived from the term for dead. It's not from the Latin meaning black, negra. In origin, it's Greek, it means negro, necro means dead. So there are people mentally dead. So what I semi-joke with people. I say, when people say, what are you doing? I say, I'm about my father's business. I've got to go around to all these Lazaruses that's around who don't know themselves outside of a enslaved status. Is it sounding a bit heavy now? I'm getting, I like it. Rescue me. I'm a bit heavy.
Yeah.
I'll move it up.
Yeah, you're getting a little bit too heavy now, brother. Just
okay.
Yeah.
So this is what Carter Woodson said. He said, when you control the human's thinking, you don't have to worry about their actions. You do not have to tell them to stand here or go yonder. They will find their proper place and will stay in it. You do not have to send them to the back door. They will go there without being told. In fact, if there is no back door, they will cut one for their special benefit. Their education makes it necessary. So this is about mind control. It's about the mental breakdown of a people and the necessary role to repair it. Black girls with a behavioral problem. What happened was I was in a school doing a consultancy. I was asked by a history teacher to come and check some, there were about 7 year 9 black girls. What had happened, their behavior had gone off after Christmas, the Christmas holidays. And she was wondering, the teacher was wondering why this had happened. So I came in to look at my thing is about behavior and culture, etc. That's what I have my consultancies in. So what happened was I went into the class, I'm sat there, the girls came in, they were like the usual suspects, you know, quite chatty, whatever. And then the teacher, Miss Kuzak, she came in, she dropped the first book on the table. I let out a laugh, and then I stood up, and she says, oh, I thought you were staying. I said, when did you start teaching this part of the course? She said, after Christmas. And I went, hey. She did not actually think, this is an Irish descent teacher teaching about Black peoples of the Americas. She did not even think that these young girls would be upset by the fact they were being told they were slaves over and over and over. In fact, the African past in this book is about 3 paragraphs, then it goes straight into enslavement. She didn't even think. It's like a cognitive dissonance. So I always say to people, there's we need to understand. Historically, remember, Africans were not taken. It was not like the genocide against Jewish people in the 1930s and 40s. It was not the same. They wanted Africans for labor. They were exterminating Jewish people. They wanted Africans for labor. We became the zombies. We're supposed to be mentally dead and well. And then what happened was, in Jamaica in 1781, we were given Christianity because there were so many of the uprisings being led by the spiritual practices of Africans that are known as Obia or Voodoo, etc., Candomblé, Santa, all those different things were leading rebellions. The spirits of freedom held in that sense of self were causing trouble. So Christianity was given to pacify. This is, by the way, this is not opiates of the people business. Well, Manchester, remember, we've got Charles Engels there. So this is the role of, the communist view, the Marxist view of religion. This is a practical thing that was done across the Caribbean and the Americas. So the need for Black history. This is where I go to cross culture. Black history, every time we say the word black, we're reciting the word lack inside it. I hope you can see that. So the language of Hebrew, the core language of Judeo-Christianic faith, has no word for history. I know Warren is going to tell me I do this here. Warren will correct me if it's like, but he said here, the term zakar means memory. We don't deal with history, that's external. Memory is internal. It says it's active and experiential. It also means to think, mention, record results from purposeful action. Going back to, if you're going back to visit the traumas of your past, the victimization, you do so with intention and purpose, not just sitting back and taking it, because that means you'll be doing the work of the person who is oppressing, who's giving you the trauma, without them being there. You're repeating it on their behalf. We have to get out of that. A lack of memory or history is a form of amnesia. Forgetfulness, a loss of memory due to usually to brain injury, shock, fatigue, repression, or illness. Certainly a gap in one's memory. What is very important is that this idea of slave making, a lot of people don't know about. Slave making. It was a deliberate process that needs to be looked at, and we still need to heal from. Thirdly, the selective overlook or ignoring of events or acts that are not favorable or useful to one's purpose or position. I was once doing a session down in Congleton in Cheshire. It was the end of October. I was doing a session, and then I mentioned about enslavement. There was a middle-aged lady there, twin sets and pearls, and she told me, why do you keep looking back on the bad things that have happened in life? Why don't you look forward to the good things? Mentioning slavery like this is not positive. And I said to her, excuse me, is that a poppy on your chest? She actually sat there with a symbol of remembrance on her chest and told me to forget. Is this making sense? These are some of the experiences. So there's now had to be the black poppy rose. The sister contacted me today who runs this initiative to remember the war dead who were from black descent, Asian descent, etc. Psychohistory is a science of historical motivations which combines the insights of psychotherapy with the research methodology of the social sciences. This helps to understand the emotional origin of the social and political behavior of groups and nations, past and present. And this is a book I told you about before from Amos Wilson, The Falsification of African Consciousness, Eurocentric History, Psychiatry, and the Politics of White Supremacy. I saw that someone later in the conference is going to be addressing white supremacy and maybe white supremacist groups. I don't know how you're going to be doing that. So this is what Dr. Ivan Van Sertimi said. Let no one say why you're looking back to the architecture, the ships and metallurgy and the achievements of the old world. Surely these things happened thousands of years ago or hundreds of years ago. He said, no, no, no. This is the universe, space-time continuum. What happened 10,000 years ago and 10 minutes ago have the same relevance as they occupy the same space and time in consciousness. This is one of the key things that trauma from our what's that the old thing? Give me the child before the age of 7 and I will give you the man or the mind. There are things that are layered in, the traumas layered in right across the board. Never mind color or race. This is just social issues. It can be social, emotional issues, all layered in. And sometimes I would actually say deliberately so as well. He goes on, no one who thinks that the oldest traceable ancestor they can point to was a slave, nobody who thinks that can be anything but a sick man or woman. It's like a form of disability, especially doing for self. So what's the matter with this? Historical discontinuity is a restricted focus on the historical period containing enslavement, colonization, and racism. I'm finishing now.
Oh, you're a star. You're a star. Thank you.
And I'm saying that if this is all that is taught, it's re-traumatization. If that's all that is taught. And we need to get, so what happens is, this is just, I'll do this very quickly. This boy comes in, person one comes in, brings their history and their cultural capital in. They'll bring with them their color, their culture, their class and character into the context, which will give them a sense of status. Person two will come in, they will do the same. Their history, their cultural capital, they'll bring with their color, culture, class, character into the context. They too will have a sense of status. I like to say history and lineage between the two of us, we try and rehumanize. Dehumanization requires rehumanization. If you check this just to finish, please try this. Get a Word document. Write the word dehumanization. And then change the D to an R, change it to rehumanization and see what happens. Because what will usually happen is it'll give you a red line underneath and suggest dehumanization again. It's like we can't get out of it. So if we're going to have a human family, we have to get over anything and everything that is stopping that, even the things that we may find most unpleasant. Thank you very much. Apologies for the break and everything. Yeah.